I think it's going. That means everybody be on your best, yeah, like your feet on the ground. Behavior, right? Sit up. Be on your spot, like I told you. Come on, come on. You guys don't want to. You know what's going to happen? If you're bad and I have to say something to you, guess what's going to happen? It's going to be recorded forever on YouTube.
Or no chocolate raisins.
And then or no chocolate raisins. That's exactly right. Dad, you are brilliant. I tell you what, that was a good answer. Okay, shall we read it? This is the Chronicles of Narnia, the Magician's Nephew, and chapter 11. Diggory and his uncle are both in trouble. Which one did we do last time? The first joke and other matters. That's right. I'm sorry you missed some, but if you want, you can look on YouTube. I bet your dad will let you listen. I bet.
Yeah, Grandpa. The book I read reading has the same size pages, but each chapter has like 10 of.
Okay, now what? We're not talking while the recording is going, or else what? Yeah, we enter with the recording is too long to fit on my deal. Is what'll happen. All right, are we ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you may think that animals are very stupid, not to see at once that Uncle Andrew was the same kind of creature as the two children and the cabbie. But you must remember that the animals knew nothing about clothes. Animals don't know about clothes, do they?
No.
They don't know.
Except for their fur.
Their fur. They thought that Polly's frock and Diggory's Norfolk suit and the cabbie's bowler hat were as much parts of them as their own fur and feathers. They wouldn't have known even that those three were all of the same kind if they hadn't spoken to them and if Strawberry had not seemed to think so. And Uncle Andrew was a great deal taller than the children and a good deal thinner than the cabbie. He was all in black except for his white waistcoat, not very white by now, and the great gray mop of his hair, now very wild indeed, didn't look to them like anything that they had seen in the three other humans. So it was only natural that they should be puzzled. Worst of all, he didn't seem to be able to talk.
What?
He had tried to, when the bulldog spoke to him, or as he thought first snarled and then growled at him, he held out his shaking hand and gasped, "Good doggy," then "Poor old fellow." But the beasts could not understand him any more than they could understand them. They didn't hear any words, only a vague sizzling noise. Wow, he sizzles. That's funny. Maybe that means that's the kind of sounds that the barbecue makes. All right, you two, over here, way over there, on your butt, all the way up, elbows not touching the ground. Thank you. Appreciate it. Now you guys realize that this is getting recorded. All of your bad actions are going to be forever on YouTube, which means you might be ashamed of this when you're 25. Or your mom might smack the daylights out of you when she finds out. Yeah, like your mother watches these. So there you go. Then Uncle Andrew dropped down in a dead faint because the dog was growling at him, right? But really the dog was talking to him, wasn't he?
Is that a dog?
That's a bear, yeah. "There," said the warthog, "it's only a tree." So the warthog thinks that Uncle Andrew is a tree, right? I always thought so. Remember, they had never yet seen a faint or even a fall. The bulldog, who had been sniffing Uncle Andrew all over, raised his head and said, "It's an animal, certainly an animal, and probably the same kind as these other ones." So the bulldog knows by smelling that they're the same kind of animal, right? Right? "I don't see that," said one of the bears. "An animal wouldn't just roll over like that. We're animals and we don't roll over, we stand up. Like this." And he rose on his hind legs, took a step backwards, tripped over a low branch and fell flat on his back. Hey, now listen. This is the third time I'm speaking to you. One more time and you're going to go sit in the car, okay? You got to sit still.
It's just hard.
I know, but you can do it. Look at who's littler than you and is sitting still. A whole bunch of them. So you shouldn't make yourself be ashamed because they can do better than you, right? No, you should be a good example, right? Yes. Okay, so thank you. Now, I won't warn you another time. One more warning and you will go to the car, for sure. Okay? Got it? Not joking? Understand 100%? Got it? So don't provoke him. I mean, don't fiddle with him and make him want to be bad, okay? So help him by you being good too, all right? Got it? Got it? All right, there you go. Because it's hard if you have to stop and talk to people who aren't being good. It interrupts the story, doesn't it? Right, so don't do that again, please. I appreciate it. All right. Surely you don't mean, said the jackdaw to the badger, that you think it's a talking animal? It didn't say any words. And yet you know, said the elephant, the she-elephant, of course, her husband, as you remember, had been called away by Aslan. And yet you know it might be an animal of some kind. Mightn't the whitish lump on the end of it be a sort of a face? And couldn't those holes be eyes and a mouth? No nose, of course, but then one mustn't be narrow-minded. Very few of us have what you would exactly call a nose. She squinted down the length of her own trunk with a pardonable pride. So, in other words, the elephant likes her own nose, right? That's what it means. You gotta be quiet too, just like your cousin, okay? Even you have to be quiet, all right? You guys are actually being pretty good. After this last talking to he got, I think everybody has the message, right? Got the message? Everybody's being really good, right? Very good, I like that. Okay, I'll tell you what, the donkey said brightly. Perhaps it's an animal that can't talk but thinks it can, all right? Can it be made to stand up, said the elephant thoughtfully. She took the limp form of Uncle Andrew gently in her trunk and set him up on end. Upside down, unfortunately, so that 2 half-sovereigns, 3 half-crowns, and a sixpence, that's money in England, fell out of his pocket. But it was of no use. Uncle Andrew merely collapsed again. So what would happen if we took, say, Savannah and stood her on her head, but she's sleeping? What would happen? She'd just fall over again, right? Well, that was what was going on. Uncle Andrew was sleeping because he passed out. And so the elephant stood him on his head and turned loose, but what happened? He just flopped over, right? On the ground. And that's what happened. And all of his money fell out of his pockets, which will become an important part of the story later, okay? There, said several voices. It isn't an animal at all. It's not alive. I'll tell you, it is an animal, said the bulldog. Smell for yourself. Smelling isn't everything, said the elephant. Why, said the bulldog, if a fellow can't trust his nose, what is he to trust? Well, his brains, perhaps, she replied mildly. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog. Well, we must do something about it, said the elephant, because it may be the needle. Guys, remember the needle? Remember the needle? Because Aslan spoke about an evil, but all the animals thought it was a needle, right? Anyway. Might be an evil, and it must be shown to Aslan. What do most of us think? Is it an animal or something of the tree kind? So what are the animals going to think? Are they going to think it's an animal or a tree? What do you think?
Tree.
Okay, it's a tree, said a dozen voices. Very well, said the elephant. Then, if it's a tree, it wants to be planted, we must dig a hole. The 2 moles settled that part of business pretty quickly. There was some dispute as to which way was up that Uncle Andrew had to be put into the hole. And he had a very narrow escape from being put in head foremost. So imagine, they think he's a tree, and they stick him in face first and bury his head, right? That'd kill him, wouldn't it?
Yeah, then he will go dead.
Yeah, that'd be the end of him. Yeah, he wouldn't even be able to breathe. Several animals said his legs must be his branches, and therefore the gray, fluffy thing, that meant his head, must be his roots. But the others said that the forked end of him was the muddier and that it spread out more, as roots ought to do, so finally he was planted the right way up. And then they had patted down the earth, it came up to his knees. It looks dreadfully withered, said the donkey. Do you know what happens if you take a plant and you pull it out of the ground? It gets all limp and goes, zoop. So they thought that it had gone withery. So what are they going to do to a plant that withers? Do you know what to do to a plant that withers?
Water.
So what's going to happen to Uncle Andrew?
He's going to get wet.
He's going to get watered, that's right, he is.
And plus he's passed out, so he's probably not going to wake up.
Of course it wants some watering, said the elephant. I think it might say, meaning no offense to anyone present, that perhaps for that sort of work, my kind of nose, because you know elephants can suck up a whole bunch of water. Did you know that?
And peanuts.
And peanuts too, that's right, yep. I object to that remark very strongly, said the bulldog, but the elephant walked quietly to the river, filled her trunk up with water, and came back to attend to Uncle Andrew. The sagacious animal went on doing this till gallons of water had been squirted over Uncle Andrew. And water was running out of his shirt and out of his frock coat as if he had been a in for a bath with all of his clothes on. Do you guys take baths with all of your clothes on?
No.
Savannah? You?
Really don't get wet. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
so silly.
It'd be silly, wouldn't it? But Uncle Andrew has now taken a bath with all of his clothes on, right? Anyway, what a waking it was. We must leave him to think over his wicked deeds if he is likely to do anything so sensible and turn to more important things. Now, where was Strawberry at? With Aslan, right? Strawberry trotted on with Diggory on his back till the noise of the other animals died away, and now the little group of Aslan and his chosen counselors was quite close. Diggory knew that he couldn't possibly break in on so solemn a meeting, but there was no need to do so. At a word from Aslan, the he-elephants, the ravens, and all of the rest of them drew aside, and Diggory slipped off his horse and found himself face to face with Aslan. And Aslan was bigger and more beautiful and more brightly golden and more terrible than he had thought. He dared not look into the great eyes. Please, Mr. Lion, Aslan. Sir, said Diggory, could you, may I please, will you give me some magic fruit from this country to make my mother well? He had been desperately hoping that the lion would say yes. He had been horribly afraid he might say no, but he was taken aback when it did neither. This is the boy, said Aslan, looking not at Diggory but at his counselor. This is the boy who did it. Oh dear, thought Diggory, what have I done now? Son of Adam, said the lion, where is the evil witch abroad in my new land of Narnia? Tell these good beasts how she came to be here. A dozen different things that he might say flashed through Diggory's mind, but he had the sense to say nothing except the exact truth. I brought her, Aslan, he answered in a low voice. For what purpose? I wanted to get her out of my own world back into her own. I thought I was taking her back to her own place. How come she was to be in your world, son of Adam? By magic. The lion said nothing, and Diggory knew that he had not told enough. It was my uncle Aslan, he said. He sent us out of our own world by magic rings. At least I had to go because he sent Polly first. And then we met the witch in this place called Charm, and she held on to us when... You met the witch, said Aslan in a low voice, which had the threat of a growl in it. So do you think there's more to the story about how they met the witch than he met the witch? What do you got to say?
Why does the front of the book have a lion on it?
Because that's Aslan.
Oh.
There you go.
Creating the world.
And he created the world. Okay, well, she woke up, said Diggory wretchedly, and then turning very white. I woke her because I wanted to know what would happen if I struck a bell. Polly didn't want to. It wasn't her fault. I fought her. I know I shouldn't have. I think I was a bit enchanted by the writing under the bell. Do you? Asked Aslan, still speaking low and deep. No, said Diggory. I see now I wasn't. I was only pretending. There was a long pause, and Diggory was thinking all the time, I have spoiled everything. There's no chance of getting anything from Mother now. When the lion spoke again, it was not to Diggory. You see, friends, he said, that before the new clean world I gave you is 7 hours old, a force of evil has already entered it. Who's the force of evil?
White witch.
The witch. And who brought the witch?
Diggory.
Diggory, yep. Waked and brought hither by this son of Adam. The beasts, even Strawberry, all turned their eyes on Diggory till he felt that he wished the ground would swallow him up. But do not be cast down, said Aslan, still speaking to the beasts. Evil will come of that evil, but it is still a long way off, and I will see to it that the worst falls upon myself. In the meantime, let us take such order that for many hundreds of years yet this shall be a merry land in a merry world, and as Adam's race has done the harms, Adam's race shall help to heal it. Draw near, you other two. The last words were spoken to Polly and to the cabby, who had now arrived. Polly, all eyes and mouth, was staring at the lion and holding the cabby's hand rather tightly. The cabby gave one glance at the lion, took off his bowler hat. No one had yet seen him without it. When it was off, he looked younger and nicer, and more like a countryman and less like a London cabman. Son, said Aslan to the cabby, I have known you long. Do you know me? Well, no, sir, said the cabby. Leastways not in an ordinary manner of speaking. Yet I feel somehow, if I may be so free, as how we've met before. It is well, said the lion, you know better than you think you know, and you shall live to know me better yet. How does this land please you? It's a fair treat, sir, said the cabby. Would you like to live here always? Well, you see, sir, I'm a married man, said the cabby. If my wife was here, neither of us would ever want to go back to London, I reckon. We're both country folks, really. Adam drew up his shaggy head, opened his mouth, and uttered a long single note, not very loud, but full of power. Polly's heart jumped in her body when she heard it. She felt sure that it was a call, and that anyone who heard it would want to obey it. What's more, would be able to obey it, however many worlds or ages lay between. And so, though she was filled with wonder, she was not really astonished nor shocked at all when all of a sudden a young woman with a kind, honest face stepped out of nowhere and stood beside her. Who was that? The cabby's wife. She just showed up.
I knew that would happen.
That is crazy, isn't it? Polly knew at once what it was, the cabby's wife, fetched out of our world not by any tiresome magic rings, but quickly, simply, and sweetly as if a bird that flies to its nest. The young woman had apparently been in the middle of washing day, for she wore an apron, her sleeves were rolled up to the elbow, and there were soap suds on her hands. If she had had time to put on her good clothes, with her best hat and imitation cherries on it, she would have looked dreadful. As it was, she looked rather nice. She was washing clothes with her hands. In those days, they didn't have dishwashers. They didn't have clothes machines. They just washed clothes with their hands. Isn't that crazy? Of course, she thought that she was dreaming. That was why she didn't rush off to her husband and ask him what on earth had happened to them both. But when she looked at the lion, she didn't feel quite so sure it was a dream. Yet for some reason, she did not appear to feel very frightened. Then she dropped into a little half curtsy, as some country girls still do, and stood there. After that, she went and put her hand in the cabby's and stood there looking around a little shyly. My children, said Aslan, fixing her eyes on both of them, you are to be the first king and queen of Narnia. So who's the king and queen of Narnia? The cabby and his wife, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of funny. Maybe Strawberry will get a good job too. What do you think?
No.
Maybe. We'll find out.
I think
The cabby opened his mouth in astonishment, and his wife turned very red. You shall rule and name all of these creatures, and do justice among them, and protect them from their enemies when enemies arise. And enemies will arise, for there is an evil witch in the world. The cabby swallowed hard 2 or 3 times and cleared his throat. Begging your pardon, sir, he said, and thanking you very much, I'm sure, which my missus does the same, but I ain't no sort of chap for a job like that. I never had much education, you see. So he got the job of being the king, and what does he think? What's the cabby think about being the king?
he's not gonna do very
He doesn't think he can do it, does he?
No.
Yeah, but guess what? Well, Aslan says, you can use a spade and a plow and raise food out of the earth. Yes, sir, I can do a bit of that sort of work, being brought up to it like. Can you rule these creatures kindly and fairly, remembering that they are not slaves like the dumb beasts of the world you are born in, but talking beasts and free subjects? I see that, sir, replied the cabby. I try to do the square thing by them all. And would you bring up your children and grandchildren to do the same thing? Oh, it'd be up to me to try, sir. I'd do my best. Wouldn't we, Nellie? And you wouldn't have favorites among either your own children or among the other creatures, or let any hold another under or use it hardly. I never could abide such things goings on, sir, and that's the truth. I'd give 'em what for if I caught 'em at it, said the cabby. All through this conversation, his voice was growing slower and richer, more like the country voice he must have had as a boy, and less like the sharp, quick tone of a cockney. And if enemies come against the land, for enemies will rise, and there was a war, would you be the first in the charge, and the last in the retreat? Well, sir, said the cabby very slowly, a chap don't exactly know till he's been tried. I dare say I might turn out ever such a soft one. Never did no fighting except with my fists. I'd try, that is. I hope I'd try to do 'em a bit. So what's going to happen? The guy's going to become the king, isn't he?
Yeah.
The cabby is going to be the king. Then, said Aslan, you will have done all that a king should do. Your coronation shall be held presently, and you and your children and grandchildren shall be blessed. And some will be the kings of Narnia, and others will be the kings of Archenland, which lies over the southern mountains. And you, little daughter, here he turned to Polly, are welcome. Have you forgiven the boy for the violence he did to you in the Hall of Images, in the desolate place of accursed charm? Yes, Aslan, we've made up, said Polly. That's well, said Aslan. And now for the boy himself. Uh-oh. Guess what? What do you think?
He's in trouble.
What do you think? What do you think?
I think he's gonna be in trouble.
I think he may be in
And
trouble.
I remember. Who is telling him that he can be king?
Aslan's telling him.
Oh.
Aslan made a king out of the cabbie and his wife. But guess what's going to happen to Strawberry? You want me to tell you up front before we read the next chapter?
Yes.
Strawberry is going to grow wings.
He's gonna become a.
Flying horse?
It's not a
What is it?
unicorn.
A horse
It's a
with-
Pegasus.
A Pegasus. Strawberry is going to become a Pegasus, and guess what's going to happen to Diggory? You want me to tell you?
What?
Diggory is going to get sent to this special place and have to face the Nevil. Who's the Nevil?
The witch.
The witch. Diggory is going to have to go face the witch, the Nevil. Now that's really an evil, but the animals thought it was an evil because they didn't know English, right? Those guys didn't know English too good, those animals, right? They're just talking animals.
Sort of stupid.
Yeah, but you know what? They had never been alive before. They just came alive that very day. Were you stupid on the day you were alive?
Yes.
Probably pretty stupid. My guess is you were going, wah, 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 and you might have even pooped, maybe. Hard telling. Yucky old black baby poop. That could have been pretty gross, right? Yeah, I guess you might have been kind of stupid when you first came alive too. I think we all were. But guess what? What you can't believe is that I'm done with the chapter already. Does that make you happy?
Yeah.
Yes, I thought you'd be happy. All right. Guess what? So I want to know how many kids really honestly were stinkers today. Any kids honestly were stinkers? Because I heard a bad report about you. Were you honestly a stinker? Were you sorry for being a stinker? You're not even sorry about you were a stinker?
Yeah, you was, man.
You were sorry. Okay, so here's the thing. We all are going to be stinkers sometimes, okay? Sometimes we're stinkers. And if we're sorry about being stinkers, what happens then? Remember how Aslan asked Polly if she had forgiven Diggory?
No chocolate raisins.
Well, if you stay a stinker, you don't get no chocolate raisins. But if you are a stinker and you say you're sorry, then what? You can get forgiven is what happens, right?
Yeah, we
And
can
then?
get chocolate.
Alright, so let me go shut off the video and let's just see.
All of us were stinkers.
Were you guys all stinkers today?
Bye-bye.
Alright, bye-bye. Alright.